Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I just want to finish a thought that I had at the end of yesterday's show about how much I appreciate and respect your opinion and how I know you want me to stop talking. And I respect that. And I will absolutely do that. And I'm going to stop right now after I tell you how much I really appreciate getting to host this podcast with you.
That's fantastic, Tom. You are the only person who I would have offered the co-host seat to because you were there. So very exclusive club. Good job, Tom. Right place, right time for all of this glory. I bet you are happy.
90% of life is just showing up. And, you know, if you have no other qualifications, then 100% of life is just showing up. So
I'd say 98% showing up, 2% throwing up. If you do it right.
Depends on where you're showing up and what you're doing when you're there.
So this is our next listener questions episode. And just so you guys know, like you all sent in a bunch via Twitter. So we're not going to get through them all today. Don't worry. There will be probably more shows to come over the next few days because, you know, what else are we going to do? Again, we are here for you. This has nothing to do with us. This has everything to do with you guys and also then providing us stuff to talk about, which we desperately need. And it's not even June yet, Tom. I don't know what we're going to do.
I have a feeling listeners will still have questions between now and June. So I think we'll be okay. But yeah, this is these shows are always great because it's like we're not here to hear ourselves talk. We want to, you know, we want to tell you what you want to know about. So this is a great way for us to know what you want to know about because when you ask us questions and we can answer them. So that is a valuable service that you, the dear listener, provide to us. So thank you very much. And thank you to @TLAG7863636 on twitter.com. Does the new defensive staff mean there will be players leaving for the portal? And if so, where do you see the most likely movement? With McCalister coming in, I would think at least two safeties are going to be leaving. Do you agree?
I think this is a pretty interesting question because I don't really consider anybody leaving at this point. It feels like those who have left, those who would be leaving before spring, maybe already have. I don't know that Tanner McCalister is going to scare anybody away at this point. I think they want to maybe like Cameron Martinez wants to see what McCalister can do, but even Cam Martinez is playing free safety, playing a deep safety when we last saw him. So they may not ever become intertwined with McCalister being more of a slot guy, a nickel guy. So I don't think he chases two safeties away. I wouldn't be surprised if after some talks with Jim Knowles and any of the other new defensive coaches, if players are like, well, okay, this is not really my thing. There really isn't a spot for me in this defense. It's a bit of a different defense. It's not a huge change, but it wouldn't shock me if, you know, in February, maybe there's some more movement after players get to talk to the coaches. And that's already kind of happening now. But they don't really need to chase anybody away because I think numbers are fine. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want as many people as you can get. But then once spring football happens, you're going to lose some guys. That's just normal. But I don't see McCalister chasing anybody away. And I really hadn't thought about guys leaving because of new coaches coming in because they've already had a chance to leave. So, you know, but I guess wouldn't shock me if a couple of players leave once all of this gets settled with the coaching staff. They just realize either they're not a fit with that coach or they're not a fit with Jim Knowles' defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility, but, you know, this is not the kind of schematic overhaul that you're getting if, you know, when Georgia Tech moved away from the triple option or when, you know, you're moving from, traditional offense to the air raid like Mississippi State. Like you don't have like this complete schematic overhaul. They're going from what was basically a 4-2-5 last year to a 4-2-5 this year. And you're going to have slightly different roles, but you're not going from a 4-3 to a 3-4 where it's like, oh, well, now you need, different types of, different body types of defensive line or something like that. This is a little bit more of a subtle approach. And, you know, it's not necessarily you need different players. It's just those players are going to be doing different things. within this Jim Knowles scheme. So I don't think I would expect like a massive outflow of people. You may find people, after spring, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of transfers after spring ball, because there's always a lot of transfers after spring ball, and there's always a lot of transfers everywhere after spring ball. But numbers wise, they're in completely fine. No shortage of available scholarships. So you're not, they're not going to be chasing guys off or anything like that. And they've had enough guys go into the portal already that the guys who were just kind of like buried on the depth chart, those guys are probably largely already gone. Not all. There are some guys that I think are still possible candidates for that kind of transfer at some point after the spring. But, I'm not expecting like a massive outflow of people. And, at the safety position specifically, I don't know that you're going to see that this spring, because they're kind of thin there, where you've got no Josh Proctor because of a leg injury. You've got no Lathan Ransom because of a leg injury. Those two guys are probably not practicing this spring. So everyone else is going to be a little higher on the depth chart than they probably in the spring than they probably are in the fall. So I don't know that you're going to see a huge outflow of safeties after the spring either.
Yep, that's where I am.
All right, next one from @216_wildboy. Rumors of OSU compliance blocking NIL. And what would it take for Ohio State to win the national championship in the 2022 season? Tony, I'll take the second half, and then you can have the first half. What would it take for Ohio State to win the national championship in the 2022 season? I think that is a completely viable thing. That is absolutely a possibility this year. I don't think that's even one of those like, oh, well, if you can squint, you can kind of see it. Like, there are probably three teams that are head and shoulders talent-wise above everyone else in the country right now, and it is Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Those are the three. You've got other teams that have been in that conversation, Clemson, Oklahoma, but those are teams that have had a lot of offseason turmoil and, changing of coaching staffs and players hitting the portal and all that kind of stuff. I think I think there is kind of a big, dark dividing line between the top three and the rest of the sport this year, just talent-wise in general. And I know Michigan fans are going to say, well, the Michigan just beat Ohio State. Like, okay, that's great. And a lot of those very talented players are going to be playing on Sundays this fall and not on Saturdays. And I don't think you have another Aiden Hutchinson or David Ajabo on that roster. So that might be a problem. And, Oklahoma has issues. Clemson has issues. USC is probably going to get there, but they're not going to get there this year. Notre Dame, first-year head coach. I think we have seen Notre Dame on that stage against the, high, super talented teams ahead of them, and they generally don't win those games, especially when they're played in late December or early January. So I think Ohio State, if Ohio State goes 11-1 in the regular season, wins the Big Ten, and they're going to be in the college football playoff, and then with the offense as good as the offense should be, and the defense probably better. I don't think this is going to be an immediate like 0-60 on the defense, but if the defense can go 0-30 and just be better, that offense is going to score enough points to win an awful lot of games. And I think Ohio State going into the playoff next year, if they're in there, I think that's a team that Alabama or Georgia or Clemson or Notre Dame or whoever else they might face in the playoff is going to look at and go, that I don't think that's going to be the team that everyone's rubbing their hands together and go, oh, good, we get to play Ohio State.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you take Oklahoma out of the picture. Maybe you're taking Clemson out of the picture. Like all of these other, there's only so many teams that can make the playoffs. And if you're already removing some of those teams, 4 teams have to go, as we said so many times this year. Now, rumors of OSU compliance blocking NIL is one of my favorite subjects because, Tom, there are so many boogeymen with this NIL stuff. We know OSU compliance guy, Doug Archie. There's a lot of consternation with him. We know the entire state of Texas, Texas A&M, the university itself, University of Texas, unstoppable with this NIL stuff. There's going to be no containing them. And now Alabama, I read on the internet, Tom, that Alabama, they're trying to repeal their state NIL law, which would mean that there are no rules, except, Tom, it would mean that they would just fall back to the NCAA rules, which say you can't entice players to come to your school for NIL money. Like the amount of concern and worry about this whole thing is predicated on the fact that people don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the rules. But in terms of OSU compliance blocking NIL, they can't block legal NIL stuff. Like there are rules, and if the entities are following those rules, there's no reason to block it because there's going to be no eligibility issues provided the rules are followed. Now, should OSU compliance be blocking NIL that is against the rules? Yes. Are other schools not going to block it, or are their compliance departments going to look the other way? I don't know. I'm sure you think they are. Like, obviously, that's the only way they can have success is by cheating. Now, does that mean they won't that they won't be cheating? Schools are still going to cheat. Like, this cheating has gone on. This is not going to eliminate cheating, but the idea that, I don't know, like OSU is being overly strict, again, they're just trying to protect themselves in terms of losing players. Now, have they been incorrect with some of their rulings, the OSU compliance department over the years? Yes. Have they been they misinterpreting stuff or too strict? Sure. But like I if you do it on the up and up and you do it properly, then I don't know what the concern is, or I don't know why OSU compliance would be blocking it. And anytime I just see rumors of something with the NIL, immediately I'm like, well, there's probably more fear there than facts.
Yeah. And I think that right now, as with a lot of stuff in college football, anyone who's doing 5% more than you is a dirty cheater. And anyone who's doing 5% less than you is someone who doesn't care about football and is basically a basketball school. And I don't know why they bother to play the sport at all. And it's just like, whatever your team is doing, it seems like, well, that's what, that's the right level. And, there we can have a whole separate conversation on the inclination of fan bases to just like latch onto one particular whipping boy and just do the 2 minutes hate thing from 1984. It's just like, oh, look, it's the guy from compliance, everyone boo and throw your popcorn at the screen. Like, and then 3 months from now there will be someone else and we'll all be booing and throwing our popcorn at the screen about that. And I mean, I'm sure that Ohio State is not going out of their way to, do nothing with NIL, and they're not sitting passively on the sidelines. And just because they're not doing exactly as much as everyone else, it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it wrong. So, yeah, I am. My general inclination is not to jump on that bandwagon with I have a feeling that the average person who is yelling and screaming about this probably doesn't have a great grasp of what the job actually is that they're yelling and screaming about. So that's, consider being mad about less stuff is, I guess, what I'm suggesting here. That's good general life advice, I would say.
It is. And don't look for stuff to be angry about. I said this on Mark Rogers' show on Wednesday. Like, if you are so terrified about NIL and what other schools are going to be doing, shouldn't you also be concerned about losing CJ Stroud in the transfer portal? Shouldn't you also be concerned about losing Travion Henderson? If Texas A&M and Texas and Alabama can go get anybody, why would they go and get high school players? Why wouldn't they come and get your best players, like all of the best players? Why wouldn't they do that instead? If they have oil money, Tom, do you hear me? Oil money. The only people in Ohio who have oil money are those hillbillies up in Findlay. All right. Tony, Texas is all oil.
Tony, why would Texas need CJ Stroud? They have Quinn Ewers. But they're going to bring him in. They're going to pay him $1 million to come be Quinn Ewers' backup? Idiot. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you,
Tom?
Next one from @BCS Buck. How much is the extra year of eligibility due to COVID affecting recruiting and transfers? I think in general, the answer to this is going to be slightly less every year. I feel like last year, with some of the weird results you saw where the top of the sport had lost a lot of their guys, and then everyone else in the sport, the guys who were going to be 6th or 7th round picks or undrafted free agents, a lot of those guys came back. So it kind of brought the floor of the sport up a little bit, where the ceiling of the sport, it was not as good a year for Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or Oklahoma. Just, yes, I know Georgia won the national championship, but their team, overall team was not necessarily as good as some of the other teams in the past. I think we said earlier that, any of the top 3 teams in 2019 probably win the championship this year. Ohio State, Clemson, LSU probably all win the national championship if you port them from 2019 to this year. The top of the sport was just not quite as good, not quite as deep as it typically are. And everyone else was a little deeper and a little better. So now, as some of the, super seniors age off of rosters, you're going to have more super seniors now, but the numbers are kind of going to start shrinking a little bit every year. So I think year by year, you're going to see a little bit less impact on the sport in terms of bringing that bottom tier or the middle tier up towards what the top tier is. And, you potentially have more guys who could be in the transfer portal, guys who are the guy who is the 2-year starter at the MAC level or at the low Power 5 level, who's a multi-year starter and now might have 1 extra year of eligibility. You might see some of those guys kind of sliding up the totem pole. The 2-year starter at tight end for Kansas State might be in the transfer market to Ohio State, or, and I don't have a particular Kansas State tight end in mind when I say that, but just, pick a school. You may have someone like that who's in the transfer portal and ends up at Alabama or ends up at Ohio State or whatever it is. So, but I think in general, I think you have already seen the season where that's going to have the biggest impact. And now you're going to sort of start to see that trail off just a little bit in each successive season.
Yeah. You look at like Thayer Munford coming back, maybe sent Max Ray into the portal. I don't know the exact time frame on that, but like stuff like that, and almost sent DeJuan Jones into the transfer portal. We know, but I think I'm with you, Tom. It'll get less and less, except for the little butterfly effect of something that sent somebody like a Bryce Young somewhere, and then he goes and leads a program. But it's like the unseen stuff that you can't even really attribute to this. That is still actually part of this. But yeah, it eventually you won't notice it, but it's still like it's still part of the game, and it will be for a few more years. And we even see it with the schedule restructuring this week. That is all part of that. And then once all of these super seniors are gone, and I'm sure coaches will be like, I think there's going to be some relief there, because yes, it is nice to have these guys, these leaders and these captains, but also some of those guys keep roster spots, and not that they're taking numbers from you, but they're keeping young guys from progressing. And it's very difficult, I think, for some coaches to choose the younger guys over the 6th-year senior, because you need that leadership. You need the confidence and comfort level that those guys bring. And I think that inhibits some of the development of the younger guys, just having those guys take their reps.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that, I mean, like you said, that having that extra guy stick around for next year. Chris Olave coming back last year, did that push Jamison Williams into the portal? I mean, Jamison Williams could have ended up in the portal anyway, because he wasn't getting a ton of balls. But, if Chris Olave is gone, there's a scenario where Jamison Williams sticks around, and then Jamison Williams becomes the, incredible deep threat for Ohio State last year. And then, does Alabama not get to the level that Alabama did? Or does that force Jackson Smith-Njigba into the transfer portal, because now he's the 5th guy on the, I mean, there's a million different scenarios there. So you just kind of assume that everything has worked out for the best and move on with your life, because otherwise you're going to go nuts trying to figure out all the different implications. Mm-hmm. Got 2 together that we can kind of answer together. One from at BCS Buck, starters on the offensive line next year, and from at Squabard, will next year's offensive line be better than this year's? I'll tell you what. I'll start with the first one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, starters on the offensive line next year. I'm thinking Paris Johnson at left tackle. I'm thinking Matt Jones at left guard. I'm thinking Luke Whippler at center. I'm going to say Donovan Jackson at right guard, although I think you could make a very good argument for any number of other people. Harry Miller, if Harry Miller's back next year. Mm-hmm. They've got some other talented guys in there that you could slot in there as well. And then DeJuan Jones at right tackle. I think, to me, that's the most likely offensive line. But there are I would definitely not have successfully predicted the starting offensive line that they rolled out there, even on August 1st last year.
No, that's the same five I have, and the wild card there is Harry Miller, even possibly at center. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't expect. I think once you've got your guy at center, you kind of just leave him there and let him get better and let him grow. And I'd say Luke Whippler had a very similar season to, say, Billy Price in 2014 as redshirt freshman centers. It was on that level. So you leave him there and let him grow into an All-American or a Remington Award winner. But I could definitely see Harry Miller. I think that's pretty much the only really the real competition is Harry Miller and Donovan Jackson for that right guard spot. And it just depends on when is Harry Miller healthy enough to compete. Is he going to be ready for spring? Or is this going to be a fall thing after you've already had, if he's not ready to go for spring, then you're talking Donovan Jackson and maybe like Josh Fryer. Because they really want to get Josh Fryer somewhere, but you also need backup tackles.
Yeah.
So like, who are your two backup tackles? Is it Enoch Famahi and Josh Fryer? Or are you now to the point where Grant Toutant is there? Is that Mahalski? You mentioned a couple of other guys as well. Tell me, Tom, the other tackles.
The other tackles, Trey LaRue is a possibility at tackle. Trey LaRue is a possibility at tackle. I mean, Jacob James at center, Toby Wilson at center. There's just so many guys who are in that room that we haven't seen before. And we don't, I feel like I have a pretty good sense for the starting offensive line. The second string offensive line, I mean, you could tell me, I would guess Enoch Famahi and Josh Fryer at the tackle spots, and Toby Wilson right now is the backup center. So I guess that's sort of the default answer there. And then
who's the other guard?
Ben Chrisman is someone that I think they like a lot. That he's a possibility. I was trying to think back to practice. I think Ben Chrisman and Grant Toutant were on the scout team. And Zen Mahalski might not have been on the scout team. So maybe, want to take that as an indication that Zen Mahalski might be closer to one of those backup tackle jobs. You can do that if we're just going to read maybe way too much into the fact that, that can also mean that, some of those guys were built more similarly to the Utah offensive linemen. So, you can't read too much into any of that. But, I think any of those are kind of possibilities. But yeah, I'll say Josh Fryer and Enoch Famahi at tackle, Toby Wilson at center, Harry Miller at guard, assuming he's healthy and he doesn't win a starting job, and yeah, I mean, kind of take your pick. I don't feel like I have a huge gap between a lot of the candidates for that other guard spot.
Who is the 10th best string guy? That's your backup, your fourth guard, basically. If you would ever get to that point. In terms of, will next year's offensive line be better than this year's? I think it can be as good. And if it's better on the days you need it, then that's the key. If it's better against Michigan, if it's better in the postseason in terms of running the ball, and of course in terms of protecting the quarterback, which they didn't do against Michigan. Now I suspect it will be better protecting the quarterback next year against Michigan, but that has nothing to do with necessarily the offensive line. I'm interested to see what this running game looks like with Justin Fry. I think I'm expecting improvements, but also maybe a little rededication of it by Ryan Day. You bring this guy in, and so you're going to see if things continue to go well or start to go well, then you rely on that. Do you think, Tom, so Ohio State played how many games this year? 13. CJ Stroud played 12. If he plays 14 games next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he throws for fewer yards than he did this year.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it because you go back to, what was the craziest passing year in the history of Ohio State football? It was 2018 because they couldn't run the ball, right? Yeah. That was the Dwayne Haskins year where he put up insane passing stats, and it was because they couldn't run the ball. When did CJ Stroud put up, break the school record for passing yards this year? when they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't run the ball against Oregon. He put up whatever, 400 and yada yada yards against Oregon. He put up 600 something yards against Utah because they couldn't run the ball. He put up good passing numbers against Michigan because they couldn't run the ball. When you can't run the ball and throwing the ball is your only option, you're going to throw the ball a lot more. I think, I think I would feel somewhat confident in saying it's going to be a better run game offensive line in 2022 than it was in 2021. You would be hard pressed to have better pass pro than they did in 2021. If it's even comparable and they're running the ball better, then I think that does constitute a better offensive line. Because if they can run the ball better, then you're a little more balanced. And then that balance and the fact that the other team has to respect the run probably helps the pass pro a little bit anyway, where they can't know you're passing and you're not falling into predictable passing situations. And that probably helps that pass pro anyway.
I'm looking at the numbers. So he threw for 4,435 yards in 12 games. For him to throw for fewer yards than that in 14,
only 14 hater.
I'm just as a happy medium between 13 and 15. He would have to throw for about 316 yards a game. And that feels kind of low because he threw for 369.6 this year. So 316 seems kind of low. I think what they can do is throw for another 340 and then also rush for more. Like I spoke too soon when I said he would throw for fewer yards in 14 games. I think it's possible. 316 yards a game doesn't sound like very many. And if, Tom, you want to go all the way to 15, now you're talking 295 yards a game. And there's no way that he's definitely throwing for more than 295 yards per game.
He definitely is. But what I'm hearing out of you is that 2022 is the year of 220. Man, I am already so excited every single week. I hope you guys are ready to buckle up for an entire fall of me saying 220, and Ohio State not doing it once. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait.
I'm looking forward to seeing the one time we bet it up. Like, what is the highest we can get to with next year's offense? Like a 250 or 257 and a half, 258 type of thing, 258, maybe. Perhaps we will see. I can't wait. And the spring game bold predictions, now that I'm thinking about it. That's
so you're telling me I can bet on the Ohio State offense and against the Ohio State defense? Is that what I'm hearing?
220 for sure. Except they never run the ball.
900. Who says no? Next one from @VW Chad W. Do you guys think the defensive line will be improved next year?
Tom, do you think the defensive line will be improved next year? Because I think losing Haskell Garrett is significant, but you've got enough guys back. I just really think the defensive line is improved with an improved defense. I think if Larry Johnson, if he's back, is doing exactly what Jim Knowles wants from his defense, I think it will work together. And I think the defensive line improves because the defense is better. It's a different defense, and it's just in terms of what they want from it, what they want from the defensive line. I think it will. There has to be improvements simply because you've got a new set of eyes. He's going to be like, well, why are you guys doing this? Why are you guys doing that? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And I think Jim Knowles is going to have the ability to get what he wants. And he's a guy that he produces TFLs and sacks. That's what he does. So I'm thinking that the defensive line will be better, thanks in part to offensive lines having to pick up more blitzes, and that frees some defensive linemen. So I do think they will be improved on the defensive line next year.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think, if you're coming from less predictable places, like the Ohio State defensive line generally has just been 4 guys down, and when they have a Chase Young or they have a Nick Bosa or they have a Joey Bosa, that guy is supernaturally talented and can get to the quarterback. And when you don't have one of those guys, you are getting close to the quarterback because you have very good players, but you're this is like 3 years in a row that it's been, I guess 2 years in a row ever since Chase Young left, that it's like, boy, they keep just almost getting there and not quite getting there. It's in every time we talk to the defensive line, it's like, oh, that's got to be so frustrating. Is that so frustrating? I bet that's frustrating. And every time, like, yep, we just got to get there a little quicker. If you have better coverage out of your corners, and you get the quarterback to hold the ball a little longer, then that gives you time to get there. if you're coming from unpredictable places or unpredictable angles, or, having, coming with, having certain guys drop and other guys come, where you've got, one offensive lineman blocking air because he thought you were going to be there, and instead you've dropped into coverage and there's someone else coming free somewhere else, that's going to make those numbers better. So I think the unpredictability of this year's Ohio State defense is going to probably improve the production from the defensive line. So, does that make it a better defensive line or just a more productive defensive line? I don't know that it matters. That might be the same thing for the purposes of this exercise, but I am very intrigued to see a second-year JT Tuimoloau, a second-year Jack Sawyer, potentially a fourth-year Zach Harrison, a Jerron Cage back in the middle. Jerron Cage, I think, came on pretty strong last year. Get him back in the middle. Teron Vincent back for another year. Like there's, and then you've got Tyleik Williams, Mike Hall, like a lot of young talent there as well. There is a lot of talent on this defensive line, and I think they might get used a little differently next year. And so, I again, does that mean they're actually improved, or does that just mean they're more productive? Sure. Yes to both, I guess.
Yeah, and you saw what JT Tuimoloau did in the Rose Bowl. Like he was really a strong point for the Buckeyes at times. So just continue to project him. Tom, do we want to do this last one from at Jason Vogt?
Yes, I think we need to do the last one from at Jason Vogt. Clarify a couple things. There's been some ugly rumors out there. He says, is it true Mark called a staff meeting and called you all losers? Is it also true that Kevin kicked Tom in the hammy and benched Bill after he fumbled an interview on his Florida trip? Jason, first of all, how dare you? I cannot believe you'd ask that question. Bill has never fumbled an interview in his life. That is your tip off that obviously that didn't happen. Everything else is true. And in Mark's defense, we are losers. That's all true. Kevin kicked me in the hamstring. Yes, I had missed several field goals before that, so I had it coming. And, Mark was really mostly looking at Tony when he said that, but, we had it coming. I can let that go, especially because, when he was staring at you, Tony, and pointing and saying you, I think maybe Jason misinterpreted it as being directed at all of us when in fact it was not.
So you're saying Mark looked at me and pointed and said, you are all of the losers.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
You singularly are pluralitily all of the losers. That was me. I find it funny that Jason thinks that Kevin can bench Bill, for one. I mean, that's pretty hilarious.
He may not have a great sense of the org chart.
But also, when I yelled, I did yell at you, said I had better euchre partners at Bowling Green. That is true. Back in high school, I had tremendous euchre partners at Bowling Green. But I don't like it when this stuff gets out. Like, this is private stuff. It should not be out there. And did I put it out on my TikTok? Yes, but that's TikTok. Nobody follows me on TikTok. It's just where I, do a little choreography and stuff like that, and then share stuff like these from our the meeting minutes are fantastic. By the way, we should just go over those at one point, and because I have learned some tremendous new insults from Mark. It's just been fabulous, and losers was the bright spot.
And I guess the upside of all of this is, hey, we have the number one pick in the draft next year. So I mean, was it a lost season? No, not at all.
No, and we'll make the best of it, make the most of it. That will do it. Tom, got anything else?
No.
Good. I didn't even mean to ask. So I want to thank Tom for being quiet. This is the first. It's fantastic. We're just going to let this soak for like 6 minutes. Going to let this go, and we can all enjoy the silence of Tom not talking. It's just, it's good. But instead, you guys will just fast forward and you won't even be able to appreciate it. So I'm just going to end it, and then I'll sit silently for 6 minutes on my own. So I want to thank you all for joining us as always. We do appreciate it. Thanks, and we will talk to you guys later.